So a number of people have told me that the reason they joined my challenge that starts next week is because they have pelvic organ prolapse, and that's why they've decided to join this particular challenge. So I thought I'd make a video with my 5 top tips for how to train with a prolapse, so that anyone going into the challenge with a prolapse and wanting to learn how to manage that better through exercise has that information ready to go. It's really, really important to state that as a trainer, exercise isn't about fixing or healing a prolapse, and anyone online that's trying to sell you some kind of fitness program that is going to help you heal your prolapse is kind of talking out of their arse. POP, or pelvic organ prolapse, happens when the ligaments holding our pelvic organs up get kind of stretched out and weakened, and that isn't always reversible. It isn't always because of a weak pelvic floor, although that may contribute towards it. It's really important to see a really good pelvic floor physiotherapist, and there is a lot that they can do to help. Sometimes it will involve strengthening your pelvic floor. But when we talk about exercise with a pelvic organ prolapse, it's about helping you find ways of being active that don't aggravate your symptoms or put too much demand on your pelvic floor, or even potentially making it worse. And it's also about doing things that support your pelvic floor. But it's also about becoming more confident and empowered through movement, learning that you can actually do things and learning how to do as much as is possible within the limitations of your prolapse. And that's going to be a little bit different for everyone. So here are my 5 tips. First of all, you want to learn about breathing mechanics. The pelvic floor doesn't just work in isolation, it's part of a pressure system. Your pelvic floor, diaphragm, and all of your abdominal muscles. This is called your core canister. And we learn breathing mechanics to be able to connect to our pelvic floor and to also learn how to both contract and release the pelvic floor. But we also want to learn about breathing mechanics so that we can learn how to manage pressure and not put excess pressure and demand on our pelvic floor. It's got a lot to do with how we do things. So a lot of exercises get demonized, like sit-ups, for example, but it's probably got a lot more to do with how you do it, and also working up to that level of difficulty. A really important point to make here is stop sucking your belly in, because you're just squeezing that part of the canister and the pressure's got to go somewhere, so it's likely to go towards your pelvic floor. Lots more to say about breathing mechanics, but let's leave it there. Number 2, you want to get to know exercises that take pressure off the pelvic floor, that take weight off the pelvic floor and a low demand on the pelvic floor. So for example, glute bridges or a hip thrust, but also exercises, standing exercises like a single leg deadlift, or even doing something like a dumbbell row is something that doesn't put an awful lot of pressure on your pelvic floor. This doesn't mean that these are the only exercises that you can do, but as a starting point, you know that these are exercises that are going to be possible for you to do. So this is where you start and you build out from there. You also want to know how to incorporate these exercises and positions into your workout program. So if you've just done something that's higher demand on the pelvic floor, like a squat, or that you know makes you symptomatic, like going for a short run, then you can do some exercises that take the weight off the pelvic floor, take the demand off the pelvic floor, and give your pelvic floor a break. You can also use this in daily life. If you go for a long walk, you can go and get the weight off the pelvic floor and give your pelvic floor a break and actually get the weight of the organs off the pelvic floor. Number 3, learn which exercises make you symptomatic or aggravate your symptoms. So 3 really classic things that tend to make people with prolapse symptomatic are impact, like running and jumping with lots of bouncing up and down, which makes sense. Number 2, heavy weights. And 3, certain movements. So something like a squat is often really high demand on the pelvic floor, especially when it's full range of motion, especially when it's with load or with weight. Again, it doesn't mean that you can't do these things ever again. Some people may not be able to do them, but many people can start by doing exercises that have less demand on the pelvic floor and bridge the gap towards the ones that they want to do. And many women do return to running, jumping, and lifting weights. So an example might be, instead of doing 10 minutes of jump rope and then going, oh, like I've leaked and blah, 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 you could start with 10 seconds of doing a jump rope and then getting the weight off your pelvic floor and then building that up in 5-second increments. Number 4, strengthen the glutes. Pelvic floor and glutes are BFFs. The glutes help support pelvic floor function, and there are lots and lots of exercises that you can do in your workouts that strengthen the glutes and aren't high demand on the pelvic floor. This should be the bread and butter of your training program, at least in the beginning when you have prolapse. So many people will focus on the adductors, and that matters, but there's not enough focus on the glutes. The glutes also drive many movements, like getting up off a chair or off the toilet or climbing upstairs. And if your glutes are working harder, it's likely to take some of the demand off your pelvic floor. My 5th and final tip is don't be afraid. There's lots of really, really scary stuff on the internet, and unfortunately a lot of trainers and physiotherapists really feed into that fear. Having pelvic organ prolapse isn't a life sentence to lie on your back and do breathing exercises for the rest of your life. It's something that holds so many women back from living an active lifestyle, but also from doing activities that not only are healthy for their bodies, but that bring them joy. With the right guidance and with the right advice and the right support, it is possible for many women to return to doing all the things that they want to do. That doesn't mean it's a 100% guarantee for everyone, but it really is worth putting in the effort and the time and the energy to getting to know your body, getting to know your symptoms, and gradually exploring and assessing new movements and new strategies and finding what works for you. It is important to do these things mindfully and to be really honest with ourselves about what's going on. There's no point just ignoring the symptoms and just pushing through. But on the other hand, it's a real shame to just resign to not doing anything in order to not aggravate your symptoms. There is a middle way. I hope this video was helpful. Please let me know if you have any specific questions about prolapse in the comments below, and share this with a friend if you think it could help her.